Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Tell us, which part of the world are you watching from today? Morning coffee or evening wind down? Share below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Precipice. Maxwell Grant stared at the small TV screen mounted in the corner of his prison cell. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the thin mattress beneath him. He wanted to collect millions by slaughtering us all. Veronica wailed hysterically on live TV, her mascara streaming down her face in perfect rivulets. The camera zoomed in dramatically on her trembling hands as she clutched their 4-year-old daughter Lily to her chest. He sabotaged the brakes. He tried to kill us. Max's stomach churned. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a respected neurosurgeon with a seemingly perfect life. A sprawling house in Portland's West Hills, a beautiful wife who ran a successful interior design business, and an adorable daughter who was his world. Now he was prisoner number 4872, charged with attempted murder and insurance fraud. The prison guard banged his baton against the bars. "Grant, your lawyer's here." Lawrence Davenport had been Max's friend since medical school, before he'd abandoned medicine for law. Now in his late 40s, Lawrence's once athletic frame had softened, but his mind remained razor-sharp. As they sat in the sterile visitation room, Lawrence leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've discovered the horrifying truth, Max. Which is, the brake lines were cut, but the surveillance footage from your garage was tampered with. The timestamps don't match up. Someone edited out 20 minutes on the night before the crash." Max's pulse quickened. "I need to see that footage." "That's just the beginning. I hired a forensic accountant to go through your finances. Someone's been siphoning money from your joint accounts for months. Small amounts, cleverly disguised as household expenses." "Veronica," Max whispered, the pieces beginning to align in his mind. "There's more," Lawrence continued. "Your wife's phone records show she's been in constant contact with someone named Patrick Reynolds. I did some digging. He's an IT security specialist, specializes in surveillance systems and digital forensics." Max's thoughts raced back to 6 months ago when Veronica had insisted on upgrading their home security system. At the time, he'd been too preoccupied with a complicated surgery case to pay much attention. "The life insurance policy on you was upgraded to $5 million 3 months ago. Your signature was on the paperwork, but I'm betting it's a forgery. She's framing me for something she did," Max said, his voice hollow. "But why crash the car with Lily inside? She would never risk our daughter." Lawrence's expression darkened. "That's what doesn't add up. Unless the crash wasn't supposed to be severe," Max finished. "Just enough to create a narrative." Before Lawrence could respond, the door opened, and the guard announced their time was up. As Lawrence gathered his documents, he squeezed Max's shoulder. "The preliminary hearing is next week. I'm going to request a full forensic investigation of the vehicle, if we can prove tampering of the evidence." That night, as Max lay on his thin prison mattress, his mind shifted from confusion to cold clarity. If Veronica had betrayed him, risking their daughter's life in the process, there would be no forgiveness. Only justice. His justice. Chapter 2. The Abyss. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom buzzed overhead as Judge Harriet Whitfield adjusted her glasses. At 62, she had a reputation for being meticulous and unshakable. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her expression neutral as she surveyed the room. Max sat beside Lawrence, wearing an ill-fitting suit provided by his attorney. Across the aisle, District Attorney Sophia Martinez arranged her documents with practiced precision. At 45, Martinez had never lost a high-profile case, and she clearly viewed Max as her next victory. Veronica sat behind the prosecution, her slender frame draped in a conservative black dress, playing the part of the grieving wife who narrowly escaped death. Beside her was a man Max had never seen before, tall, with meticulously styled dark hair and an expensive watch glinting beneath his shirt cuff. Patrick Reynolds, he presumed. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Whitfield addressed the room. This is the preliminary hearing for case number 8472, State versus Maxwell Grant. Mr. Davenport, I understand you have new evidence to present. Lawrence stood. Yes, Your Honor. The defense requests to present findings from an independent forensic investigation of the vehicle in question. Martinez objected immediately. Your Honor, the police forensics team already completed a thorough examination. Conducted by Detective Brian Slater, Lawrence countered, who happens to be Mrs. Grant's cousin. We believe this represents a clear conflict of interest. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Max noticed Veronica straighten in her seat, exchanging a quick glance with Reynolds. Approach the bench, Judge Whitfield ordered. As the attorneys conferred with the judge, Max studied his wife. The woman he'd fallen in love with during their medical residency had been vibrant and genuine. This carefully constructed facade of vulnerability seemed alien on her face. When Lawrence returned to the defense table, there was a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. She's allowing our evidence. The courtroom doors opened, and Lawrence's forensic expert, Dr. Abigail Torres, entered carrying several folders and a flash drive. As she was sworn in, Max noticed Reynolds leaning forward, whispering urgently in Veronica's ear. Dr. Torres walked the court through her findings. The brake lines were indeed cut, but not in the manner consistent with the prosecution's timeline. Furthermore, the tool marks indicate a serrated blade, not the smooth-edged utility knife found in Dr. Grant's workshop. Martinez tried to discredit the findings during cross-examination, but Torres remained unflappable. Then Lawrence played his trump card. Your Honor, I'd like to present security footage from the Grant residence, specifically from their garage. This footage has been analyzed by digital forensics experts who discovered significant tampering. As the video began playing on the courtroom screens, Lawrence narrated. As you can see, this section from 10:47 p.m. to 11:12 p.m. on the night before the incident has been deleted and replaced with a looped segment of empty garage footage. Objection, Martinez called. This evidence wasn't included in discovery. Because we only obtained it yesterday, Lawrence countered, and I submitted it to the prosecution first thing this morning. Judge Whitfield overruled the objection, and Lawrence continued. We've also discovered that someone accessed the security system remotely that night using credentials registered to an IP address belonging to Patrick Reynolds, an IT security specialist who has been in regular contact with Mrs. Grant. All eyes turned to Reynolds, who had gone pale. Veronica clutched his arm, her knuckles white. Lawrence wasn't finished. We've also obtained Mrs. Grant's bank records showing payments to Mr. Reynolds totaling over $50,000 in the past 6 months, classified as home security upgrades, but deposited into his personal account. My wife deliberately smashed our car with our innocent daughter strapped inside, then pointed the finger at me, screaming I sabotaged the brakes. Max finally spoke, his voice resonating through the hushed courtroom. While I sat in a cold prison cell, my attorney uncovered the horrifying truth. Lawrence then presented the forged insurance documents, expertly traced to a tablet registered to Reynolds. The final blow was cell tower data, showing Reynolds at the Grant residence during the time the security footage had been tampered with, directly contradicting his sworn statement that he had never been to their home. In the silent courtroom, Judge Whitfield physically collapsed when Lawrence showed the medical report revealing Lily had been sedated prior to the crash, with a mild dosage of a sedative commonly used in surgeries, one that would ensure she'd remain unharmed but appear more dramatically affected in the aftermath. As court officers rushed to assist the judge, chaos erupted. Reporters scrambled toward the exits to break the story, and officers moved toward Veronica and Reynolds. In the commotion, Max locked eyes with his wife for the first time since his arrest. Her face shifted from shock to something else, calculation. Even now, she was plotting her next move. And in that moment, Max made a silent vow. This was just the beginning. Chapter 3, The Revelation. All rise. Judge Frederick Palmer had taken over the case following Judge Whitfield's collapse. At 55, Palmer had a reputation for being and fair, exactly what Max needed. 2 days had passed since the explosive preliminary hearing. Max had been released on bail, The ankle monitor a constant reminder of his tenuous freedom. Veronica and Reynolds had both been arrested, charged with evidence tampering, perjury, and conspiracy. But Max knew the battle was far from over. Veronica came from the powerful Westbrook family, with connections throughout Portland's elite circles. Her father, Theodore Westbrook, sat in the gallery, his silver hair and tailored suit a symbol of old money and influence. Beside him was Veronica's brother, Donald, a state senator with thinly veiled political aspirations. Lawrence leaned over. Westbrook's brought in Harrington Hughes. Harrington Hughes was a legend in criminal defense, a silver-tongued orator who defended celebrities and corporate executives with an uncanny success rate. His services started at $1,500 an hour, pocket change for Theodore Westbrook. As the proceedings began, Martinez announced that the state was dropping all charges against Maxwell Grant. A small victory, but Max felt no satisfaction. His daughter remained in the custody of Child Protective Services while the courts determined her placement. Hughes rose with practiced gravitas. "Your Honor, my clients maintain their innocence. Mrs. Grant continues to assert that her husband tampered with the vehicle. While we acknowledge certain irregularities in the evidence, we believe Dr. Grant orchestrated an elaborate frame-up to counter his original failed attempt." "That's preposterous." Lawrence objected. Judge Palmer called for order, then addressed the prosecution. "Ms. Martinez, what is the state's position regarding custody of the minor child?" "Given the complexity of the case, the state recommends Lily Grant remain in protective custody until a full investigation is completed." Max's heart sank. Lily was alone, confused, separated from everyone she loved. "Your Honor," Lawrence interjected, "my client is no longer under suspicion. He has a constitutional right to custody of his daughter." "The allegations against Mrs. Grant remain unproven," Hughes countered. "And given Dr. Grant's documented history of working extended hours, we suggest that neither parent is currently suited to provide primary care." Max couldn't contain himself. "Documented history? I reduced my surgery schedule 6 months ago specifically to spend more time with my daughter." "Dr. Grant, please address the court through your counsel," Judge Palmer admonished. The debate continued for another hour before Palmer rendered his decision. Lily would remain in state custody, with supervised visitation rights for Max. Veronica would have no contact pending resolution of the criminal charges against her. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. Max pushed through the crowd with Lawrence's help, ignoring the barrage of questions. In the parking garage, a sleek black sedan pulled alongside them. The tinted window lowered, revealing Theodore Westbrook's imperious face. "A word, Dr. Grant." Lawrence warned Max with a glance, but Max approached the vehicle. "You've made a grave mistake," Westbrook said, his voice glacial. "My daughter has her flaws, but she's not capable of what you're suggesting." "She risked my daughter's life," Max replied evenly. "Our granddaughter would never have been harmed. Veronica assured me the precautions were extensive." The admission hung in the air between them. Max's blood ran cold. "You knew." Westbrook's expression remained impassive. "I know my daughter was trapped in a loveless marriage with a man obsessed with his career. I know she deserved better than living in your shadow. The plan was misguided, but her intentions, to frame me for attempted murder, those intentions, to secure her future and Lily's. You may have won this skirmish, Dr. Grant, but understand this. The Westbrooks have weathered greater storms than you. When this is over, Veronica will have custody of Lily, and you'll be fortunate if you're still licensed to practice medicine." Max leaned closer to the window. "Mr. Westbrook, let me be perfectly clear. Your daughter and her accomplice tried to destroy my life and endanger my child. If you think I'm going to walk away and let your family's influence bury the truth, you don't understand who you're dealing with." "Is that a threat, doctor?" "No," Max replied, straightening. "It's a diagnosis. You're suffering from terminal hubris, and I'm not the cure." As Westbrook's car pulled away, Lawrence gripped Max's shoulder. "What did he want?" "To intimidate me," Max said. "But he made a critical error." "Which was?" "He confirmed the family's involvement, and he underestimated my resolve." That night, in his hotel room, Max began planning. The legal system was compromised by the Westbrook's influence. His medical career hung by a thread. His daughter remained out of reach. But Max had one advantage. They thought they knew his limits. They didn't realize that when it came to protecting his daughter and clearing his name, he had none. Chapter 4. The Counterattack. Max stared at the whiteboard he'd installed in his hotel suite, now covered with names, connections, and timelines written in his precise surgeon's handwriting. 3 weeks had passed since his release. The criminal case against Veronica and Reynolds was progressing slowly, too slowly, weighed down by procedural delays engineered by Hughes and supported by judges with ties to the Westbrook family. His supervised visits with Lily were the only bright spots in this nightmare. Even those were tainted by her confusion and questions about her mother. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Lawrence entered, accompanied by a woman Max didn't recognize. "Max, this is Diana Wallace," Lawrence said. "She's a private investigator I trust implicitly. Former FBI, specializes in digital forensics." Diana was in her late 30s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Dr. Grant," she nodded, "I've reviewed your case. The Westbrooks have significant influence, but they're not untouchable." "I can't afford subtlety anymore," Max replied. "I need leverage." "That's why we're here," Lawrence said, setting his briefcase on the table. "Diana's been investigating Reynolds. He's the weak link." Diana placed a laptop on the table and pulled up a series of documents. "Patrick Reynolds isn't just an IT specialist. For the past decade, he's been a fixer for several high-profile families in Portland, including the Westbrooks. When problems arise that can't be solved through official channels, Reynolds makes them disappear." "What kind of problems?" Max asked. "Everything from scrubbing, compromising information from the internet to more hands-on solutions." She pulled up an article about a hit-and-run accident from 3 years ago. The victim was a former intern at Westbrook Industries who had filed a sexual harassment complaint against Donald Westbrook. "The case was ruled an accident, but my sources indicate Reynolds arranged it." Max studied the article. "Can you prove it?" "Not definitively, but I found something else." She switched to another document. "Reynolds maintains secure servers containing files on all his clients. Insurance, he calls it, including detailed records of everything he's done for the Westbrooks." "Where are these servers?" Max asked. "A data center in Vancouver, Washington, across state lines, away from the Westbrooks' influence." Lawrence looked uncomfortable. "Max, we need to be careful here. Accessing those servers would be illegal." "So it was framing me for attempted murder," Max replied coldly. "I'm done playing by rules they ignore." Diana assessed Max with newfound respect. "I can get into the facility, but I need remote support to access the servers themselves." Max thought of Aaron Sullivan, a gifted programmer he'd helped after a traumatic brain injury had nearly ended the young man's career. "I know someone who could help," he said, "but I need to be certain. What's your bottom line, Ms. Wallace?" "Justice," she replied simply. "I spent 15 years watching the wealthy evade consequences. Now, I help level the playing field." Max nodded. "Then we have alignment." The plan came together over the next week. Aaron agreed to help immediately, still grateful for Max's surgical intervention 2 years earlier. Diana mapped the data center's security protocols, identifying vulnerabilities. Lawrence, despite his misgivings, provided legal cover through carefully worded consultations that established plausible deniability. On a rainy Thursday night, Diana entered the data center posing as an IT auditor with credentials Aaron had fabricated. For 37 agonizing minutes, Max and Aaron monitored her progress from a van parked 3 blocks away, guiding her through the digital barriers Reynolds had established. "I'm in." Diana's voice came through their secure line. "Downloading now." When she returned to the van, her expression was grim. "We've got everything, but it's worse than we thought. Reynolds has been working for the Westbrooks for 15 years. Their relationship goes back to when Veronica was in college." Back at the hotel, they began sifting through the files. The revelations were staggering. Reynolds had helped Donald Westbrook cover up 3 sexual assault allegations. He'd assisted Theodore in burying evidence of environmental violations at Westbrook Industries manufacturing plants. And most disturbingly, He'd been Veronica's handler since she was 20, recruited to seduce Max when he was a promising young surgeon from a modest background. "They targeted me," Max whispered, staring at emails between Theodore and Reynolds discussing the grant acquisition. "My entire marriage was a setup." "They saw you as an asset," Diana confirmed. "A brilliant surgeon with earning potential and social mobility." Theodore wanted to expand the family's influence into medical circles. Max felt the last remnants of his old life crumble. The wedding, the promises, the birth of their daughter, all orchestrated as part of a Westbrook strategy. "There's something else," Aaron said, pointing to a folder labeled contingencies. Inside were detailed plans for various scenarios in which Veronica might need to exit the marriage, including the car crash plot. "They never intended for you to go to prison permanently," Diana explained. "Just long enough to pressure you into a settlement that would give Veronica custody of Lily and control of your assets." The plan included a key witness coming forward later to create reasonable doubt, at which point Veronica would magnanimously refuse to pursue charges in exchange for your cooperation. The calculated cruelty of it stunned Max. But amidst the shock, a cold determination crystallized. He now possessed the leverage he needed, not just against Veronica and Reynolds, but against the entire Westbrook empire. "Lawrence," he said quietly, "how would you approach this legally?" The attorney sighed heavily. "Technically, this evidence is inadmissible, obtained illegally. But if anonymous copies were to reach investigative journalists or regulatory agencies, the court of public opinion doesn't require a warrant," Diana added. Max stood, his decision made. "Send everything to my secure drive. I need time to think." That night, as rain lashed against his hotel window, Max faced the hardest choice of his life. He could destroy the Westbrooks completely, expose decades of corruption and manipulation. But the nuclear option would inevitably splash back on Lily. Her mother would be branded a criminal, her grandfather and uncle disgraced. The Westbrook name she carried would become synonymous with scandal. Or he could be surgical, precise, and targeted. Use the information to secure Lily's custody and his freedom, while keeping the most explosive revelations in reserve. By morning, he had his answer. The Westbrooks had declared war. They'd weaponized his love for his family and twisted it against him. Now he would return the favor with surgical precision. Chapter 5. The Crucible. The Portland skyline glittered in the evening light as Max entered the Westbrook Industries Charity Gala. His invitation, secured through Aaron's digital skills, listed him as Dr. Michael Grayson, representing a medical technology investment firm. With his grown beard and tinted glasses, few would recognize him as Maxwell Grant, especially in a room where most attendees knew him only from news headlines. Diana's voice came through his nearly invisible earpiece. Security is concentrated near the main entrance and the executive offices on the top floor. Theodore's private elevator requires fingerprint authentication. Understood, Max murmured, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. The plan was, during Theodore's keynote speech, Max would access his private office using the security credentials they'd extracted from Reynolds' files, download specific documents from his computer, and plant the customized spyware Aaron had developed. Across the room, Theodore Westbrook held court, his silver mane gleaming under the chandeliers as he greeted Portland's elite. Beside him stood Donald, every inch the politician in his tailored suit, laughing too loudly at a donor's joke. Max circulated carefully, engaging in just enough conversation to avoid suspicion while monitoring Theodore's movements. When the announcement came for guests to move to the ballroom for dinner and speeches, Max slipped away down a service corridor. The executive floor was eerily quiet. Max approached Theodore's office, using the keycard Diana had programmed. Inside, the sprawling office overlooked the Willamette River, the walls adorned with photos of Theodore with various politicians and celebrities. Max worked quickly, connecting Aaron's device to Theodore's computer. "I'm in position," he said quietly. "Initiating sequence," Aaron's voice replied through the earpiece. "This will take approximately 4 minutes. Don't disconnect until you get confirmation." Max used the time to examine the office more closely. On Theodore's desk sat a silver-framed photo of Veronica and Lily at the Westbrook summer home in the Hamptons, taken just 2 months before the crash. The sight of his daughter in the arms of the woman who had betrayed them both made his blood boil. "Almost done," Aaron said. 90 seconds remaining. The office door opened without warning. Max froze as Donald Westbrook entered, stopping short when he saw the intruder. "What the hell are you doing here?" Donald demanded, then narrowed his eyes in recognition. "Grant? Is it you under that ridiculous beard?" Max calculated his options in the fraction of a second that only surgeons and soldiers understand. "Senator Westbrook," he acknowledged calmly, "I was just admiring your father's collection of compromising documents." Donald's hand moved toward his pocket. "Security will be here in 30 seconds. That's about 29 seconds longer than it would take for copies of your assault allegations to reach every news outlet in Oregon," Max replied, holding up his phone. "Including the settlements paid to Angela Winters, Brenda Chun, and Melissa Thompson." The color drained from Donald's face. "You're bluffing. The same way you bluffed when you told the police that Hit and Run was an accident. The dashcam footage Reynolds secured tells a different story." Donald's eyes darted to the computer, understanding dawning. "You've accessed Reynolds' servers. Every file, every email, every sorted detail," Max confirmed. "Would you like to know what your father really thinks about your political future? His emails to Governor Preston are particularly illuminating." The senator's political mask cracked, revealing the insecure sun beneath. "What do you want?" "Sit down," Max instructed, gesturing to a chair. "We're going to have a conversation about family loyalty." For the next 10 minutes, Max laid out exactly what would happen. Donald would convince his father to drop all support for Veronica's case. The family would cease all attempts to interfere with Max's custody petition for Lily. Westbrook Industries would establish a multi-million-dollar trust for Lily's future, controlled solely by Max until she turned 25. "And if we refuse?" Donald asked, though his defeated tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Then I burn it all down," Max said simply. "Every crime, every cover-up, every corrupt deal. Your father's legacy becomes ash, your political career ends, and the Westbrook name becomes synonymous with corruption instead of philanthropy. You'd do that to your own daughter? Destroy her family name? You seem confused, Senator. The Westbrooks are not Lily's family. I am, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect her from people who view her as nothing more than a pawn in their dynastic games." The verification tone sounded softly in Max's earpiece. Aaron's program had completed its task. Max disconnected the device and pocketed it smoothly. "You have 24 hours to consult with your father and confirm your compliance," Max said, moving toward the door. "After that, deadlines start passing and information starts leaking, beginning with the environmental violations at your Portland facility." Donald remained seated, his political confidence shattered. "He'll never agree." "Then convince him," Max replied coldly. "After all, isn't that what you do for a living? Convince people to act against their own interests." Max left Donald in the office and made his way back to the gala, slipping out through a service entrance. In the car waiting outside, Diana looked at him expectantly. "We have everything," Max confirmed, "and we've delivered our message." "Do you think they'll comply?" she asked as they pulled away from the curb. "They're pragmatists at heart," Max replied. "Once Theodore runs the numbers, he'll realize capitulation is the only viable business decision." The following day, Lawrence received a call from Harrington Hughes requesting an urgent meeting to discuss mutually beneficial resolution options. By nightfall, the framework of an agreement was in place. The Westbrooks would withdraw all support from Veronica's defense. In exchange, Max would not publicly release the most damaging information about the family's business practices. But Max had one non-negotiable condition. Patrick Reynolds would face the full consequences of his actions. No deals, no reduced charges, no wealthy benefactors providing legal support. "Why are you so focused on Reynolds?" Lawrence asked when they were alone. "Veronica was the architect. Veronica was a product of her upbringing," Max replied, surprising himself with the insight. "Reynolds is something else entirely. A mercenary who profits from corruption and harms the innocent without remorse. He stays awake at night, figuring out how to hurt people better. He paused, and tactically, isolating Reynolds makes him vulnerable. Without Westbrook protection, he'll have no choice but to cooperate with prosecutors. Lawrence studied his friend. You've changed, Max. I've adapted, Max corrected. When the rules are rigged, you don't keep playing the same losing hand. You change the game. Chapter 6, The Reckoning. The state correctional facility's visitor room smelled of industrial cleaner and desperation. Patrick Reynolds sat across from Max, the orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the bespoke suits he'd worn in court. 6 weeks had passed since the Westbrook agreement, and Reynolds' case had accelerated dramatically once Theodore withdrew his support. You must be enjoying this, Reynolds said, his voice hoarse but still carrying that undertone of arrogance. Enjoying would imply emotional investment, Max replied coolly. This is simply necessary. Reynolds leaned forward. Let me guess. You're here to offer me a deal? Testify against Veronica, and you'll put in a good word with the DA? No, Max said, placing a thin file folder on the table between them. I'm here to inform you of what's already happening. He slid the folder toward Reynolds, who opened it warily. Inside were printouts of emails, bank transfers, and surveillance photos, all documenting Reynolds' activities for clients beyond the Westbrooks. How did you? Reynolds began, then stopped himself. The servers. Your insurance policy cuts both ways, Max confirmed. Copies of these documents have been forwarded to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, with specific attention to your work for Judge Roland Murphy and District Attorney Phillips in Washington County. Reynolds' facade cracked slightly. You signed my death warrant. These people will be far too busy saving themselves to worry about you, Max finished. The federal investigation officially begins next week. Your only value now is as a cooperative witness. He reclaimed the folder. But that's not why I'm here. Then why? To understand, Max said simply. Why, Lily? You've done terrible things for the Westbrooks, but involving a child crossed a line even they were uncomfortable with. Something flickered in Reynolds' eyes. The sedative was Veronica's idea. She needed Lily to appear traumatized but not actually be hurt. Said it would sell the story better. And you just went along with it? Reynolds' laugh was hollow. You really don't get it, do you? Veronica wasn't some puppet being manipulated by Daddy. She approached me 3 years ago, wanted her own insurance separate from Theodore's arrangements. She was playing both sides, the dutiful Westbrook daughter and her own game. Max kept his expression neutral despite his surprise. What was her endgame? Independence. The crash was phase 1. Get you out of the way, claim the insurance money, secure full custody of Lily. Phase 2 was leveraging Theodore's involvement to secure her own settlement from Westbrook Industries, enough to cut ties completely. She risked our daughter for money. Not just money, Reynolds corrected. Freedom from all of it. You, her father, the Westbrook name. She wanted to disappear with Lily, start over somewhere her family couldn't reach her. He studied Max's reaction. You really had no idea who she was, did you? The revelation settled over Max like ice water. He'd been a means to an end for Veronica from the beginning, but not just as part of her father's scheme. She'd had her own agenda all along. There's something else you should know, Reynolds added, leaning closer. There was a backup plan if the crash failed. Theodore doesn't know about it. What backup plan? Ask your daughter about Uncle Patrick's special games. Reynolds' mouth twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. Veronica was coaching her, establishing a narrative. If the crash didn't work, they were going to pivot to allegations that you'd abused her. Max's vision tunneled, the roaring in his ears drowning out everything else. His hands clenched involuntarily, giving way to primal rage. If you're lying, check the cloud backup of Veronica's phone, Reynolds said, seeming to enjoy Max's distress despite his own predicament. There are recorded practice sessions with Lily. Carefully worded questions, rehearsed answers. Veronica was thorough. Max stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. The guard moved forward, but Max waved him off. We're done here. One last thing, Doctor, Reynolds called as Max reached the door. When Veronica realizes I've talked to you, she'll accelerate whatever she's planning from inside. She always has contingencies. Outside in the parking lot, Max sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. The rage he felt was unlike anything he'd experienced, cold, clarifying, and absolute. The violation of using Lily as a weapon struck at something primal in him. He called Diana immediately. I need you to find something on Veronica's cloud accounts. Videos or audio recordings of her with Lily. Anything labeled as practice or sessions. Within hours, Diana had confirmed Reynolds' claim. The recordings were methodical. Veronica gently coaching Lily through leading questions about games with Daddy that made her uncomfortable, rewarding correct answers with praise and treats. Jesus, Max, Diana whispered when they reviewed the files together. This is beyond calculation. This is pathological. Can we use this legally? Max asked Lawrence, who had joined them via secure video call. The attorney looked physically ill. Yes, this crosses every line. Witness tampering, manufacturing evidence, psychological abuse of a minor. I'll file for emergency custody revocation immediately. Over the next 72 hours, the legal landscape shifted dramatically. Judge Palmer, appalled by the recordings, granted Max emergency, full custody with no visitation rights for Veronica. The criminal charges against her expanded to include child endangerment and obstruction of justice. Theodore Westbrook, when confronted with the evidence of what his daughter had been planning, withdrew completely from her defense. Even Harrington Hughes abandoned the case, citing irreconcilable differences with the client. 6 days after Max's visit to Reynolds, Veronica requested a meeting. Despite Lawrence's objections, Max agreed, knowing he needed to confront her directly. The Women's Detention Center was newer than the facility where Reynolds was held, but no less oppressive. Veronica sat waiting, her designer prison uniform somehow still managing to look tailored, her hair perfectly arranged despite her circumstances. Max, she greeted him, as if they were meeting for dinner rather than in a prison visitation room. Thank you for coming. Skip the pleasantries, he replied. I know everything, the videos, the coaching, all of it. Something calculative passed behind her eyes before she switched tactics. You have to understand, I was desperate. The marriage was suffocating me. But I knew you'd never let me have Lily. Because using our daughter as a pawn was better? I never would have gone through with it, she insisted. It was just insurance, a backup plan. Max studied the woman he'd once loved, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. You know what surgeons develop after years of practice? The ability to recognize patterns. The subtle indicators that something isn't right beneath the surface. I missed those indicators with you for years. Max, please. She reached for his hand, but he withdrew it. We can still fix this. For Lily's sake. That's exactly what I'm doing, he replied, standing. Fixing this for Lily's sake, by ensuring she's protected from you. Veronica's mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You think you've won? This isn't over. I'm still a Westbrook. One judge's ruling won't. You're not listening, Max interrupted. There is no more Westbrook protection. Your father has cut you off completely. The family lawyers have withdrawn. Your trust fund has been frozen pending criminal investigation. The color drained from Veronica's face. You're lying. Theodore made a business decision, Max continued implacably. Sacrificing one problematic asset to protect the larger enterprise. Just like you were willing to sacrifice Lily to protect yourself. She lunged across the table, fingers curved like claws, but the guard intervened before she could reach him. As they restrained her, she screamed, "This isn't over. I'll tell them everything. All of it." Max watched dispassionately as they led her away, her threats echoing down the corridor. In the past, her outbursts might have moved him. Now they only confirmed his judgment. That evening, as he tucked Lily into bed in their new home, a secluded property with state-of-the-art security, she looked up at him with innocent trust that made his heart contract. "Daddy, are the bad people gone now?" Max smoothed her hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart. The bad people can't hurt us anymore." It wasn't entirely true, but it was the truth she needed right now. The full truth would come later, when she was old enough to understand. Promise? She asked, her small voice edged with lingering fear. I promise, he replied, kissing her forehead. And I keep my promises. As Lily drifted off to sleep, Max stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the perimeter of their property, secured by measures that would make a military installation proud. Diana had assembled a security team of former specialists who understood the stakes. Lawrence had created legal firewalls to protect their new life. For the first time since the crash, Max allowed himself to believe that they might actually be safe. But a surgeon's instinct for danger, once awakened, is not easily silenced. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a monitor continued to beep softly, warning of complications yet to come. Chapter 7. The Resurrection. 1 year later, the surgical theater at Portland Memorial's East Campus was state-of-the-art, with equipment that made Max's former hospital seem antiquated by comparison. As he completed the delicate procedure, removing a tumor wrapped around the brain stem of a 10-year-old boy, the familiar calm of absolute focus enveloped him. Tumor excision complete, he announced to the surgical team. Beginning closure now. 2 hours later, he sat with the boy's parents in the consultation room, explaining the prognosis with the compassionate authority that had once defined his career. Brandon should make a full recovery, he told them, watching relief wash over their exhausted faces. The tumor was benign, and we were able to remove it entirely without damaging the surrounding tissue. The mother grasped his hand. Dr. Grant, we can't thank you enough. The other surgeons said it was too risky. Max smiled. That's why I took the case. Outside, Lawrence waited, looking distinctly out of place among the medical staff in his tailored suit. Another miracle? He asked as Max approached. Just good surgical technique, Max demurred, but there was quiet pride in his voice. His return to medicine, facilitated by Portland Memorial's aggressive recruitment once he was exonerated, had been more successful than either of them had anticipated. His specialized focus on cases other surgeons deemed too risky had quickly established him as the hospital's star neurosurgeon. How's our other project progressing? Max asked as they walked toward his office. Lawrence's expression turned serious. Reynolds' federal testimony concluded yesterday. He's provided evidence against 3 judges, 2 prosecutors, and a state police captain, all with ties to the Westbrooks. And Theodore? Still insulated through intermediaries, but the noose is tightening. The SEC has opened an investigation into Westbrook Industries' financial dealings, and 3 board members have resigned. Max nodded, satisfied with the progress. The systematic dismantling of the Westbrook empire was proceeding exactly as planned. Pressure applied at key structural points until the foundation began to crumble. And Veronica? Lawrence hesitated. That's actually why I'm here. She's been granted conditional release pending her trial. Max stopped walking. What? How? Judge Harlow, newly appointed after Judge Palmer's unexpected retirement. He ruled that as a first-time offender with community ties, she qualified for release with electronic monitoring. Palmer didn't retire, Max said flatly. He was pressured out. This is Theodore's doing. Almost certainly, Lawrence agreed. But there's more. Veronica has filed an emergency motion for visitation rights with Lily. Max's jaw tightened. On what grounds? New psychological evaluations suggesting her actions were the result of untreated postpartum depression and coercive control by her father and Reynolds. She has a new legal team, not directly connected to the Westbrooks, but suspiciously well-funded. When is the hearing? Next Wednesday. I've already filed our opposition, but Harlow is presiding over that as well. Max processed this information with clinical detachment. She'll never stop, will she? As long as she's free, she'll keep coming after Lily. We'll fight it, Lawrence assured him. Your custody is legally solid. Legal solidity means nothing to the Westbrooks, Max replied. We need to be prepared for all contingencies. Later that evening, after putting Lily to bed, Max convened an emergency meeting in his home office. Diana arrived first, followed by Aaron and finally Lawrence. The Westbrooks are making their counter-move. Max began without preamble. Veronica's release is just the opening gambit. Diana nodded grimly. My sources confirm Theodore has liquidated significant assets recently. moving money offshore through a network of shell companies. He's preparing for something major. And Donald has been meeting privately with Governor Preston, Aaron added, referencing the surveillance data they've been gathering. 3 times in the past week, no staff present. They're consolidating power and resources, Max concluded, preparing to bring their full influence to bear. He turned to Lawrence. What are our legal vulnerabilities? The attorney sighed heavily. With Judge Harlow presiding, significant. He's new to the bench, but has a history of favoring reunification in family cases, even in situations with previous endangerment issues. So we need leverage over Harlow, Max stated. Aaron shifted uncomfortably. We've looked. He's remarkably clean. No financial irregularities, no personal scandals. Everyone has pressure points, Max insisted. Keep looking. Diana cleared her throat. There's another approach. The Westbrooks are playing the long game, using the system, deploying their influence incrementally. But their strategy depends on predictability. You're suggesting we disrupt their timeline, Max interpreted. Exactly. Force them to respond to us instead of executing their plan. Max considered this. What specifically do you propose? A controlled burn, Diana replied. Release select information to key journalists, enough to create public pressure, but not enough to trigger their nuclear options. Lawrence shook his head. Too risky. If they feel cornered, they might accelerate their efforts to reach Lily. Which is why we need to ensure Lily is somewhere they can't reach, Max said quietly. The room fell silent as the implication settled. Max, Lawrence finally spoke. If you're suggesting what I think you are, I'm suggesting we remove the prize they're fighting for, Max clarified. Temporarily place Lily somewhere secure, then force the Westbrooks into overplaying their hand. You mean disappear, Diana translated. With your daughter. Not disappear, Max corrected. Relocate strategically while we resolve this permanently. Aaron looked troubled. That's a federal offense, custodial interference across state lines. Only if there's a competing custody order, Lawrence pointed out reluctantly. Currently, Max has sole legal custody. He could, theoretically, relocate with Lily without legal repercussions, provided he notified the court eventually. Max leaned forward. I'm not asking any of you to violate the law. I can handle the relocation personally. And leave us to spring the trap on the Westbrooks, Diana surmised. Clever, but you'd be isolated without support. I have contingency plans, Max assured them. The priority is ensuring Lily's safety while we permanently neutralize the threat. The discussion continued late into the night, with Lawrence repeatedly expressing legal concerns, Aaron offering technical solutions for secure communications, and Diana identifying weak points in the Westbrook defenses. By morning, they had a framework. Max and Lily would disappear for 30 days, long enough to force the Westbrooks into desperate action, but short enough to maintain the legal fiction of a temporary relocation. Meanwhile, Diana would strategically leak information about Westbrook Industries' involvement with Reynolds, focusing on financial crimes rather than the personal aspects that might harm Lily. Lawrence would maintain a public presence, ostensibly searching for Max while actually monitoring the Westbrooks' reactions. Aaron would create a secure communication channel and manage the digital aspects of the operation. As his colleagues departed, Max sat alone in his office, contemplating the risks. The plan violated his surgical principles of precision and control. It introduced too many variables, too many potential complications. But sometimes, as in emergency medicine, the controlled chaos of decisive action was the only path forward. He opened his safe and removed the documents he'd prepared months ago. Alternate identities, financial accounts unconnected to his known assets, property holdings registered through layered LLCs, contingencies he'd hoped never to use but had prepared meticulously. 3 days later, as dawn broke over Portland, Max and Lily drove away from their home for what might be the last time. In the rearview mirror, the city skyline receded, the Westbrook Industries tower still visible like a sentinel on the horizon. Where are we going, Daddy? Lily asked, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. On an adventure, Max replied, forcing lightness into his voice. Just for a little while. As they crossed the state line, Max's phone chimed with a secure message from Diana. It's done. First story breaks at noon. The opening moves have been made. Now the game would accelerate toward its inevitable conclusion. Chapter 8. The Endgame. The cabin overlooked Lake Chelan, nestled in the North Cascades of Washington state. Purchased through a chain of shell companies 2 years earlier as part of an investment portfolio, it existed on no record connected to Maxwell Grant. Its isolation and the surrounding 100 acres of private forest made it ideal for their purpose. For 2 weeks, Max maintained their routine. Homeschool lessons for Lily in the mornings, outdoor exploration in the afternoons, secure communications with his team each night after she was asleep. The girl adapted with remarkable resilience, treating their adventure as an extended vacation. The secured tablet showed the cascading effects of Diana's information leak. 3 separate federal investigations into Westbrook Industries, Theodore Westbrook's emergency medical leave from his CEO position, and most significantly, Judge Harlow's recusal from Veronica's cases following revealed connections to Donald Westbrook's campaign donations. They're panicking, Diana reported during their nightly video conference. Theodore has made 3 cash withdrawals of $50,000 each in the past week. Private investigators, Lawrence surmised. He's throwing money at finding you. Let him waste it, Max replied. How's Veronica responding? That's the concerning part, Diana said. She's been remarkably calm. Her new attorney has requested a continuance on all proceedings, citing her need to focus on family healing during this difficult time. She's planning something, Max concluded. Maintain surveillance protocols. Any unusual movement, I want to know immediately. 3 days later, the first red flag appeared. A rental car registered to a Martin Spencer, a known associate of Reynolds, was spotted in Portland, near Lily's former school. Then a woman matching Veronica's description, despite her ankle monitor, was reported in Seattle. Her monitor shows her still at her apartment, Aaron confirmed. She's found a way to fool the system. Or someone in the monitoring company is on Theodore's payroll, Diana added. The pattern became clear. The Westbrooks were triangulating, searching systematically outward from Portland. They had resources Max couldn't match, private security, connections with local law enforcement, and the financial means to sustain a prolonged search. They're getting closer, Max acknowledged. It's time for the counteroffensive. The plan had been developed weeks earlier. Using the most damaging information from Reynolds servers, they would target the Westbrooks' financial infrastructure directly. Aaron had identified vulnerabilities in Westbrook Industries' banking protocols, legitimate access points that, with Reynolds' stolen credentials, would allow them to expose decades of financial malfeasance. Once we release this, there's no going back, Lawrence warned. The SEC and FBI will have no choice but to freeze all Westbrook assets pending investigation. Do it, Max authorized. Full spectrum release. Within hours, financial news outlets were reporting unprecedented activity around Westbrook Industries shares. By market close, trading had been suspended pending investigation into potentially fraudulent financial reporting. Federal agents were photographed entering Westbrook headquarters with boxes of documents. The following morning, Theodore Westbrook suffered a massive heart attack and was hospitalized in critical condition. Donald Westbrook canceled all public appearances and rushed to his father's bedside. The family's carefully constructed empire began to show visible cracks. But Max took no satisfaction in the chaos. His surgical instinct, the ability to sense when something wasn't proceeding as expected, was signaling danger. Veronica had remained conspicuously absent from the public eye despite the family crisis. His answer came at 2:17 a.m. when the cabin's perimeter sensors triggered silently. The alert on his secure phone showed 3 figures approaching from the northwest, moving with professional discipline. Max had prepared for this contingency. He activated the secondary security system, then moved silently to Lily's room. The girl barely stirred as he wrapped her in a blanket and carried her to the hidden panic room constructed beneath the cabin's deck. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered. "We're playing a special hiding game. You need to stay very quiet until I come back, okay?" Once Lily was secured, Max returned to the main cabin, withdrew the firearm from its biometric safe, and positioned himself strategically. The cabin's design included specific defensive features, reinforced walls, bulletproof windows, and multiple exit routes. The intruders breached the perimeter but proceeded cautiously, clearly expecting security measures. Their movements suggested military or law enforcement training, not common criminals. Max activated the cabin's external speakers. This property is secured and monitored. Identify yourselves immediately. There was a moment of hesitation before a familiar voice responded. Not from the intruders, but from the cabin's own communication system. Hello. Max, clever setup you have here. Veronica, how did you hack my system? Max demanded, though he already suspected the answer. You're not the only one with access to skilled technicians, she replied. Reynolds may be in custody, but his associates are available to the highest bidder. Max tightened his grip on the weapon. The men outside are former Special Forces operators now working in private security. Very expensive, very discreet. They're not here to harm you, just to ensure our conversation isn't interrupted. There's nothing to discuss, Veronica. Oh, I think there is. Her voice remained unervingly calm. You've done considerable damage to my family. Max's father may not survive this episode. Donald's political career is effectively over. The family fortune is being dismantled by federal investigators as we speak. Actions have consequences, Max replied coldly. Indeed they do, she agreed, which is why I'm offering you a choice. Return to Portland with Lily immediately, and I'll sign over all parental rights. Full legal custody, no visitation, no appeals. I'll disappear from your lives permanently. The offer was too clean, too easy. Why would you do that? Because in exchange, you'll provide federal authorities with evidence that Patrick Reynolds acted alone in all financial matters related to Westbrook Industries. You'll confirm that neither my father nor brother had knowledge of his activities. You want me to perjure myself to save your family. I want you to ensure my daughter doesn't grow up with the Westbrook name completely destroyed, Veronica countered. Think of Lily, Max. Do you really want her to carry the stigma of being Theodore Westbrook's granddaughter once all this becomes public record? The manipulation was transparent but effective, targeting Max's concern for Lily's future. But something else nagged at him. Veronica's voice carried none of the desperation he would expect given the circumstances. You've already made other arrangements, he realized aloud. This is just to buy time. Her laugh was soft and chilling. Always the diagnostician. Yes, Max. The family assets vulnerable to U.S. authorities represent barely 30% of our holdings. The rest is secured offshore, beyond the reach of the SEC or FBI. We can rebuild. Then why this offer? Because despite everything, Lily is my daughter too. And this path is cleaner for everyone. Max considered his options carefully. The men outside were clearly professionals. A direct confrontation would be risky. But Veronica's offer made no sense unless she had an additional agenda. I need proof, he said finally. Draft the custody agreement and have it sent through Lawrence. Once he confirms it's legally binding, we can discuss my testimony. Always cautious, Veronica replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Very well. The agreement will be delivered to Lawrence within the hour. My associates will remain nearby to ensure our arrangement proceeds smoothly. The communication ended, and Max immediately activated his secure line to Diana. Veronica found us. She's made contact. Are you and Lily safe? Diana asked urgently. For now. She has professionals surrounding the cabin, but claims she just wants to talk. He quickly explained the offered deal. It's a trap, Diana said immediately. We've been monitoring all communications to and from the Westbrook family. 30 minutes ago, a private jet filed a flight plan from Seattle to the Cayman Islands. Passenger manifest lists Veronica Grant and one minor child. The pieces clicked into place. She's planning to take Lily. The custody agreement is just to get me to lower my guard. Exactly. And once she's in the Caymans with Lily, U.S. custody orders would be extremely difficult to enforce. Max's mind raced through scenarios. Direct confrontation with trained operatives was too risky. Remaining besieged in the cabin would only delay the inevitable. They had resources to wait him out. Escape through the emergency tunnel was possible, but would expose Lily to danger if they were detected. Then he saw it, the solution requiring perfect timing and execution. Diana, I need you to contact the FBI agents handling the Westbrook case. Tell them you have information about an imminent flight risk connected to their investigation. Then patch me through to Lawrence. While waiting for Lawrence to join the call, Max prepared the necessary equipment from his emergency medical bag. When the attorney connected, Max outlined his plan quickly. That's insanely risky, Lawrence objected. If their operatives realize what you're doing, they won't, Max assured him. Professional mercenaries aren't trained for this scenario. They're expecting resistance or surrender, not medical subterfuge. After disconnecting, Max moved to the panic room and gently roused Lily. Sweetheart, I need you to be very brave. We're going to play a special game with Mommy. Lily's eyes widened. Mommy's here? Not exactly, but she wants to see you. And we're going to let her think she can, but it's just pretend. Like when you play doctor with your stuffed animals. With gentle efficiency, Max administered a mild sedative to his daughter, enough to make her drowsy but not unconscious. Then he carried her to the main room of the cabin and placed her on the sofa before activating the communication system. Veronica, I've reconsidered. Lily's asleep, but I'm willing to discuss terms in person. There was a brief pause before she responded. Open the front door and step onto the porch with your hands visible. Max complied, emerging into the cool night air with his hands raised. Immediately, two shadowy figures moved toward him, weapons raised. Inside, one ordered gruffly, "On your knees." As they secured him with zip ties, the third operative maintained his position in the tree line, providing overwatch. Max allowed himself to be restrained, monitoring his pulse to maintain the appearance of defeated resignation. Veronica's voice came through their communication devices. "Is it secure?" "Affirmative," the lead operative responded. "Subject contained. Residence clear except for the sleeping child. Bring her to the extraction point," Veronica instructed, "and sedate him. I don't want complications." As one of the men prepared a syringe, Max spoke quickly. "You should know the FBI is already tracking your employer's private jet. Kidnapping charges across state lines will mean 20 years minimum, and they pay far better for testimony against employers." The men exchanged uncertain glances, but the leader proceeded with the injection. Max didn't resist, knowing the drug, likely a standard sedative, would work to his advantage. As the chemical entered his bloodstream, Max regulated his breathing, employing techniques learned during his surgical training to slow his metabolism. He allowed his eyelids to droop, his body to slacken, giving every appearance of succumbing to the sedative. Through slitted eyes, he watched as one operative lifted Lily while the other checked Max's pulse, confirming the sedation had taken effect. "Target secure. Moving to extraction," the leader reported. The moment they moved toward the door with Lily, Max activated the final phase of his plan. The cabin's lights cut out completely, the result of a timed circuit interruption Aaron had programmed. In the momentary confusion, Max snapped the zip ties he'd partially cut earlier with a scalpel hidden in his sleeve. Moving in the darkness, he incapacitated the operative nearest him with a precise strike to the carotid pressure point, a technique he'd learned for emergency surgical situations. Before the second man could react, Max had already retrieved his concealed weapon and fired a tranquilizer dart. The third operative, still outside, began firing toward the cabin, but the bulletproof windows held. Max quickly administered the counteragent to Lily's sedative, then moved them both to the panic room. "Daddy," Lily murmured, beginning to rouse. "What's happening?" "Just a bad dream, sweetheart," he soothed, securing the panic room door. "Everything's going to be fine now." Through the panic room's security system, Max watched as multiple vehicles with flashing lights approached the cabin. Diana had delivered on her part of the plan. Federal agents responding to the report of a kidnapping attempt connected to their ongoing Westbrook investigation. Within 30 minutes, the remaining operative had surrendered to the overwhelming federal presence. When Max finally emerged from the panic room with Lily, he was met by FBI Assistant Director Caroline Reed, who had been overseeing the Westbrook investigation. "Dr. Grant," she acknowledged, "your colleague Ms. Wallace was quite insistent that we respond immediately." It appears her concern was justified. "Where's Veronica?" Max asked. "In custody at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport," Reed confirmed, "attempting to board a private aircraft with falsified documentation. We also have Theodore Westbrook's chief of security, who is coordinating this operation." As federal agents processed the scene and medical personnel checked Lily, Max realized the final piece of the puzzle. The custody agreement. It was never coming, was it? Reed shook her head. "According to the operatives we've questioned, the plan was to extract your daughter, then eliminate any witnesses." Mrs. Grant was quite explicit in her instructions. The cold finality of it settled in Max's chest. Veronica had been willing to have him killed, the ultimate elimination of obstacles to her freedom with Lily. "What happens now?" he asked. "Mrs. Grant will face additional charges of attempted kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of her release conditions. Given the evidence and testimony we've already secured, I'd say her legal problems have just multiplied exponentially." As dawn broke over the mountains, Max sat with Lily as she slept peacefully, the trauma of the night fading like a bad dream. His phone buzzed with messages from Lawrence, Diana, and Aaron, all confirming the same news. Veronica Westbrook Grant was in federal custody with no possibility of bail. Theodore Westbrook had been arrested in his hospital room, and Donald Westbrook was cooperating with authorities in exchange for leniency. The Westbrook empire, built on manipulation, corruption, and exploitation, was collapsing under the weight of its own secrets. And Max, who had entered this battle as a victim, had emerged as something else entirely. A surgeon who had excised a malignancy not just from his own life, but from an entire system that had protected predators like the Westbrooks for generations. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. 1 year later, the Portland courthouse steps were crowded with reporters as Max emerged into the bright spring sunshine. Lawrence walked beside him, both men in tailored suits that reflected their recent successes. No comment at this time. Lawrence repeated to the barrage of questions as they made their way to the waiting car. Once inside, Max exhaled slowly. Is it finally over? Lawrence allowed himself a rare smile. As over as it gets. Veronica's final appeal has been denied. 28 years without possibility of parole for the combined charges. The only way she'll see the outside of a federal prison before Lily graduates college is with a presidential pardon. And the family? Theodore will serve at least 12 years for financial crimes, though his health remains poor. Donald received 5 years with the possibility of parole after 3 in exchange for his cooperation. Westbrook Industries has been broken up and sold off to pay restitution to shareholders and victims. Max nodded, absorbing the finality of it. And Lily's trust, secure and untouchable. The court approved our petition to remove all Westbrook naming rights. Legally, she's now Lily Marie Grant, with no official connection to the Westbrook family or fortune. The car pulled away from the courthouse, heading toward the private school where Diana waited with Lily. The past year had been one of healing and rebuilding, finding a new normal after the storm. Max had returned to surgery, now heading the neurosurgery department at Portland Memorial. Lawrence had established his own law firm, specializing in cases involving family justice. Diana had partnered with Aaron to create a security consultancy helping victims of powerful abusers. And Lily, resilient, bright Lily, had flourished once the shadow of the Westbrooks was removed from her life. At 6, she showed a natural curiosity about medicine that made Max both proud and cautious. He was determined that her choices would be her own, not directed by expectations or manipulations. When they arrived at the school, Lily ran to him, her backpack bouncing. "Daddy, did you win?" Max lifted her, savoring her solid weight in his arms. "Yes, sweetheart, we won." Diana approached, her professional demeanor softening as it always did around Lily. "She's been counting down the hours until you got here." "Ice cream celebration?" Lily asked hopefully. "Absolutely," Max agreed. "We have a lot to celebrate." As they drove to Lily's favorite ice cream parlor, Max found himself reflecting on the journey. From the falsely accused husband in a prison cell to the architect of the Westbrooks' downfall, he had been transformed by necessity and choice. The ruthlessness he discovered within himself, The capacity for calculated action and unflinching resolve had saved them both. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, Max sat on his deck overlooking the Columbia River. The lights of passing boats created dancing patterns on the water. Lawrence joined him, carrying 2 glasses of scotch. To justice, Lawrence offered, raising his glass. To survival, Max countered, clinking glasses. They drank in comfortable silence before Lawrence spoke again. You know, most people who go through what you did would be broken by it. Or at least bent. Who says I'm not? Max replied quietly. The fact that you can still perform delicate brain surgery with steady hands. The way you've created a stable, loving home for Lily. The man I knew before all this wouldn't have been capable of systematically dismantling the Westbrooks while maintaining his own moral compass. Max considered this. I didn't maintain it perfectly. There were moments when I wanted to destroy them completely, regardless of collateral damage. But you didn't, Lawrence pointed out. You were surgical, removing the threat while preserving what mattered. I had help, Max acknowledged, raising his glass slightly toward his friend. A good surgeon knows when to call in specialists, Lawrence said with a smile. As Lawrence departed, Max remained on the deck, watching the river flow. The man who had entered that prison cell 2 years ago was indeed gone, replaced by someone more vigilant, more resolute, and paradoxically, more appreciative of what he had. In his darkest moments during the ordeal, Max had worried that becoming ruthless enough to defeat the Westbrooks would mean becoming like them. But he had discovered a crucial difference. Ruthlessness in service of justice and protection was not the same as ruthlessness for power and control. The Westbrooks had underestimated him, assuming his ethical boundaries would limit his capacity to fight. They hadn't understood that ethics without courage was merely posturing, and principles without action were just words. "Daddy." Lily's voice came from the doorway. She stood in her pajamas, clutching her rabbit. "Can't sleep, sweetheart?" he asked, opening his arms to her. She climbed into his lap, settling against his chest. "I had a dream about Mommy." These moments still came occasionally, fragments of memory or unconscious processing of her complicated history. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Just wanted to make sure you were still here." "I'm always here," he promised. "Nothing will ever change that." As Lily drifted back to sleep in his arms, Max gazed at the distant mountains, standing eternal against the night sky. The future stretched before them, uncertain but free from the shadows that had once threatened to consume them. From the ashes of betrayal, they had forged something stronger, a life built on truth, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between father and daughter, a life that belonged to them alone. And for Maxwell Grant, who had lost everything only to reclaim what truly mattered, that was justice enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.